Hello, Malty Mauritian malt meddlers, and thank you for that malt mention to Sashid Media. Sashid Media, that's probably the better pronunciation. I have such a cosmopolitan array of malt mentioners who remind me that we're all in the global village now, and there's so many advantages to that, because we get to explore in the modern world the eclectic varieties of incredible range of flavours from all around the world. And from Scotland, that little kind of lump in Northern Europe attached onto the head of England, you have Scotland. Scotland, affectionately known to locals as Siberia by the Sea because of its very unpleasant weather conditions. When it's lovely and the sun is shining, Scotland is beautiful. But when it's grey, cold, with a driving rain, mist and probably some of these wee midgy flies as well, it's absolutely awful. And we have to console ourselves with a wee drop of the amber nectar, which is one of Scotland's flavour contributions to the world, along with haggis. This is Ralphie Review 941. In 939, I reviewed this little charmer here. This is a 10-year-old version of Benromach single malt, bottled at 43% natural colour and unchill filtered. I've reviewed this whisky, so I'm going to put it back down on the fire at the moment. Fire's not on. It's not burning. It's not winter yet. And I'm going to introduce this very, very close relative. It's the cask strength version. Vintage 2012, batch number 1, to give you your points of reference. And it's the same whisky as this in many ways, but for a number of very distinct differences, which I'm going to go into. But first of all, where's my jolly old steampunker? I bought this in eBay, many, many years ago. I liked it because it was square and all the other magnifying glasses were round. So I bought the square one just to be contrarian. Isn't that shocking? So distilled in 2012, bottled in 2022, bottling of 30 casks. Now that's really, really useful information. We're getting a small batch bottling from a small distillery right on the border of Speyside and Highland. Benromach may be classified as a Speyside whisky, but in fact it has a coastal Highland signature. It's a little bit dry in the finish, you see. It's got that little bit of complications around and no overt sweetness like many Speysiders do. And therefore I categorise it, I categorise this as a Highland whisky. Bottled at 60.2%. Now, something I want to touch on here, just to share. That's actually quite a high bottling strength for a 12-year-old whisky. You may find some whiskies out there bottled at 58% or even 56%. But what it really boils down to is the impact of location for maturing in the casks. When you have an old-fashioned warehouse where the casks aren't stacked very high, and where the walls are thick and strong, and the environment's cooler and a little bit damper, you get less Angel's share. Less alcohol evaporates out of the casks. And therefore, for a longer period of time, the whisky, particularly in good casks, which are well maintained, no leaks, no runs, no bashes, no bumps, no drips, no weak or flimsy bungs. Have I got a bung here? Yes, I do. Here's a weak and flimsy bung. It's made of poplar, quite a spongy wood. And if it's too spongy, it starts it's one of the points at which alcohol vapour can actually leave the cask. which is why it's very good to coat the inside of the bung, or coat the edges of the bung with a little bit of Vaseline or soft paraffin wax, or Vaseline wax, beeswax. Beeswax ideal, beeswax and Vaseline, because it actually just kind of seals it off and stops additional evaporation. Very, very useful with particularly small casks. It's a practice I do with my little cask for my Patreon pals in our Patreon pal project on my Patreon/Ralphie's channel. But in the industry, they don't do it. Only they can answer your question as to why not. Because losses are losses, and it's a sign of a good distillery, good warehousing, good practice and a professional approach when you get less losses averaging out from casks. It's a good indicator of better care and better calibre of production. So here we've got little symbols and signs here to the experienced whisky drinker on this batch strength. It's saying it's a bottling of 30 casks, so it's blatantly telling us there's not hundreds, if not thousands, of casks put into the mix, which into the vat at the bottling plant, which is going to fudge the signature. You're going to get a good, clean, clear signature, and it's very much the case. It's bottled at cask strength, genuine cask strength, 60.2%. Absolutely cask strength. Most Scotch whisky is barrelled as new make spirit around about 64, perhaps slightly lower, depending on the policy of the distillery, for a very simple reason. It's to balance out the concentration of spirit retained in the cask for insurance purposes, and also to moderate the interaction between the solvent in the spirit and the wood of the cask. So if you, like in Tullybarden Distillery for example, they'll bottle some of, if not all of their spirit at 72%, which is the strength of spirit you get from twin pot or two pot double distillation in a copper still. If it was triple distilled, it would take you up to about 80%. In a column still, you can go right up to 99%. And get something which is basically vodka, because the wonderful congeners and the flavours just stripped out at that point, at that strength of alcohol. But a very revealing label. Also, it's because, and I've now remembered the other bit that I had to mention, along the top of it, it says exclusively first fill cask matured, which means for a younger aged whisky, if it's all first fill casks, new fill casks that have not previously held whisky, you're going to get much more assertive cask interaction, which adds layers, complexity and calibre of maturation to a younger whisky. So we're off to such a good start. When we taste it neat, we're given some more information. Poker face. This whisky is 60, what was it again? 60.2% alcohol. And yet, I had no problem tasting that whisky, no burn, no exceptional heat. There's no roaring fire coming from that strength of alcohol. And that is very telling. Again, for an experienced whisky drinker, what it tells you is the calibre of the casks, which, in my opinion, without doubt are wet casks, complete casks, imported complete, costs a lot more money, but gives you a lot better result. Secondly, the fullness of the spirit and the quality at which it's been distilled. To get a spirit at that strength, and there's no burn, no big heat, sure it's intense, it's 60.2%. This really is this is a 5-star bottling. This is a really, really good bottling of a very good whisky. Let's go back to the nose for a bit. Benromach in all its permutations, whether it be the peat smoke version. It's also very good. The other versions that they do are all very good. You really don't get a bad bottling from Benromach Distillery except when they reduce it to 43% and chill filter it. It's the only thing that really, well, beggars belief, to be honest. It really is a talking point online. Everybody's in agreement, and the branding as well. And yet behind this, the deeply unpopular branding, and to be honest, I read the comments that I get, and I'm saying to myself, is it really that bad? But there's no other bottle of single malt whiskey which generates more negative comments about the branding than Benromach. Not even Balblair. And it's persisting as well. You know, if I was a decision maker there, I'd really be having a very close examination of the situation. But in the meantime, let's get back to the whiskey. We're trying to focus here on the whiskey because this is seriously good stuff at a very decent price, relatively speaking. You know, in a way, when you think about it, if it's really such unpopular branding, and it's actually helping to keep the price down and keep the speculators from jumping in on it like they have with Springbank. So there's actually a silver lining to the cloud. Your experienced maltsters, because it tends to be experienced and determined malt steers who come to my channel. I was going to say malt steerers, but it didn't kind of quite sound. Malt stirrers. That's where I was going to go at, malt stirrers, but nah, it doesn't quite work, does it? Nose. Neat. Wonderful barley sugar. Great sourness, bitterness contained. Lovely, positive, clean, fresh oak. Good quality oak. Good American oak casks. Little bit of sultana. Little bit of raisin. Some wonderful, crisp, almost crystallised gingery notes in there. Absolutely delightful. A naturally intense and complex whiskey being delivered at its most intense, and very, very, all the better for it. Taste. This is neat. It's 60.2%. And what's astounding, and it really is astounding, because there's many whiskies out there from independent bottlers. You'll take your first taste of a high strength, undilute, 60 odd % whiskey, and this will be your reaction. I'm telling you. But not with this. An absolute, it's always a very good sign as to the professional calibre of production. Now I'm going to add some water. How much water? Half a teaspoon. 30 millilitres. Not centilitres. not centilitres today, millilitres. So we're just starting to cut it down a little bit. And when you add your water, don't add it all at once. Absolutely not. For really experienced people who just want to get on with it, who have been there before, who know their way around the cutting of whiskey with water, clean, fresh, soft water, filtered water, no chlorine in it, and hopefully no fluoride in it. Moving on. And you leave your whiskey a little bit. It's a relatively young whiskey, but this nose is just opening, and it's opening a little bit more, and this richness, this is what comes across. It's got this wonderful richness. I'm getting word there's mints, because there's a slight vegetal mintiness in amongst the savoury notes and the spicy notes. And the sheer barley sugar nature of this is it is very good indeed. The nose alone, I mean, I'm not even starting to taste it yet. Of course, I've tasted it a few times. And to be honest, I've had to discipline myself. I mean, they've got to take at least 2 nights a week off where I remain completely stone cold sober. Scotch whisky should be a hobby that never becomes a habit. Right? Quote me on that. It's a Ralphie quote. The flavour, boom. Getting a little bit of young heat, but wonderfully contained by that rich barley, vanilla, light sugar. What do you call that? Light brown muscovado sugar? No, it's lighter than that. It's a sort of off-white sugar that bakers use. It's got that mild sort of slightly caramelised sugary note that's just soft, sustained, integrated, unobtrusive, and it's just part of so much that's going on in here. So I'm going to add a little bit more water. Now I'm speeding this up for you. This is something that you would do just half a teaspoon over the space of 20 minutes. So if you're one that likes to rush your malts, don't bother with this. But if you like to get further by going slower, this is going to be the ideal whisky, because you're just gradually cutting it, and every time you add water to that, it knocks the flavours off the alcohol. And it does so in the space of several hours. So you can make this last several hours. It generates a wonderful natural complexity that you really don't get whiskies which have been ready watered for you to make it consumer strength down at 40%. Some flavours have been chased off due to that dilution, which are gone forever. You're getting a shorthand version of the whisky at 40%. Which is why it's such a shame when old whiskies over 21 years old, well 21 year and above, are reduced in strength prior to bottling. Frankly, it's a really bad habit in the industry. Having said that, taxes are enormous and they're related to the volume of alcohol in the bottle. But we're now in the age where people will pay that little bit extra, relatively speaking, and I do mean relatively speaking, for the strength of an old bottle of whisky, because you're getting a bigger deal. You're simply getting more product. And when a whisky's older, it matters more. That Werther's Original buttermint note, barley sugar, unpeated, crisp apple coming through, lovely spice note, little bit of cardamom, allspice, nutmeg, a little bit of melon, honeydew melon, very, very, very mild apricot. Coats the mouth beautifully because you've got the texture, you've got the viscosity, because the natural oils have been left in the bottle. And because of that, it holds in the mouth for longer. And it releases the flavours in the mouth more gently, in a more controlled manner, because the oils, the long chain fatty acids and the proteins have not been chill filtered out of the whisky. These are the same whiskies, basically, but there's 2 very important differences between them. This one has had its strength reduced from cask strength to 43%, and in order to keep the clarity at 43%, they've chill filtered it. And let's take a reality check here. We pay them to do it. So if you are a consumer and you're looking for a wee present, you probably go for this whisky. But you might decide that because there's £10 off a big brand like Glenlivet or Highland Park, and this one's not been reduced by £10 in Amazon, no, you're not going to buy it. But for real experienced whisky drinkers, people who are on the flavour chase, people who have no fear of flavour, this is the one you're going to go for. Because the calibre of delivery on the palate in particular has been uplifted by virtue of it being unchill filtered. I'll be doing an extra soon in which I'll be introducing all the types of filtering in whisky, starting with the most basic to the most advanced. I'll explain it to you so you've got a better understanding. But I'm going to conclude, before I give this a malt mark, I'm going to conclude with some advice here. Don't listen to what I tell you about chill filtration, because it goes against the grain. I'm being completely contrarian as regards the general industry advice from professionals, experts, and marketing people. But don't listen to them either. Don't listen to anybody. Get yourself a bottle. And I mean, this would be an ideal brand to use, actually, because these whiskies are essentially so similar, but the presentation is so different, because of chill filtration and because of pre-dilution. And what you'll find is when you pour them and add some water, initially they're about the same, but it's what happens over time. And the more experienced you get, it's the subtleties, the delicacies and the fine details that you pick up on over time with a slow glass of single malt, which you've bought because it's why we pay the money. Because we're about quality, not quantity. Now, let's give this a malt mark. Time for a malt mark. Yeah? 90 out of 100. It's an integrity malt mark. I hope the price doesn't jump up, by the way. I hope that this mark doesn't suddenly get this whisky exploited. Time will tell. But despite the branding, which is so unpopular, and despite the mixed messages you get from the producer, Benromach is such a good single malt whisky. It really is. It should be in everybody's whisky bar, because it is a very good illustrative example of an invested small craft distillery operating in Scotland today. I'm Ralphie. Hope you've enjoyed this review. Good luck with your experiments in sussing out chill filtration effect for yourself. Don't listen to anybody. I'm telling you what I think. Go and find out for yourself, so as that you know once and for all. Because it's your palate that matters the most when you're paying for the bottles you're buying.